Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play podcast featuring a rowdy group of best friends playing tabletop role-playing games together. I am your host and GM, Mitch Broesder. You can find me on Twitter at MagnesiumB, and you can find the show itself on Twitter over at Standard Risky. You can also find a link to the show's Discord in our show notes, where we chat about the show, post some behind-the-scenes images, character sheets, stuff like that. I am solo here for the moment, just popping in to let you know where today is a continuation of Peter and I's two-player session of Last Shooting by Grant. So if you're just starting here, pop back an episode. Listen to that first part instead. You can find Last Shooting over on Grant's itch.io page, and you can also find Grant over on the actual play podcast 6 Feet Under. Links to all of that stuff in the show notes. Not going to keep you too long here, so welcome to part 2 of our game of Last Shooting. All right, scene 2, and just revisiting what the bids that are here that need to be reflected in this scene. On your end, it is the Red Shift's signature weapon, the Particle Lance. Your special ability, the Fundamental Volatile Reactor. Your squad mates, the Company of the Boar. And the destruction of your mentor, Calithiel Ket. Whether that's a literal destruction or something, more figurative, I think is up to you, since you're the controller in this scene.
That's right.
You won, so it'll be your kind of narrative to spin out. And then on my end, I've got the Chronometric Response Accelerator for my sensors and tactical suite, which I said is kind of like a predictive movement engine. I also have, as my signature weapon here, the Fundamental Field Generators, these kind of cape-like panels on the Weight of Ascension, which are capable of kind of creating or manipulating fundamental force fields around me. And lastly, my final bid was the destruction of my mentor, Abaddon Spare, the Concordat Paladin, who has kind of taken Hyacinth under apprenticeship.
That's why you never meet your heroes, I guess. Just end up killing your mentor in time. Anything to add before we kind of hop in?
No, right. I think we're in the Anar Shipbreakers yard, this kind of like ring orbiting Anar, the planet, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Anar. I mean, yeah, in our real game of Bean Saber, we're not off world very often, so we haven't seen a lot of like interstellar transit. So, my understanding, right, is there's beacons on certain kind of first era planets that are kind of like anchor points in this hyperspace web of lanes that like kind of connect this sector to other sectors of space, right?
Yeah.
And there's gates as well?
No. So this is, my conception of it is that there are first era beacons that are, on planets scattered across the galactic network. And I think, faster than light travel is a kind of like dipping down a level of reality into the fundament, basically, right? Kind of like surfing the superstructure of the universe. But I think that in terms of like coming back out in the place that you want to be, the beacons are how you orient yourself. And so without them, there's never a one-to-one route or distance, right? So you can punch the same coordinates in twice, like doing this kind of like fundamental space travel. But unless you're like using a beacon as like your guiding light, there's no guarantee you're going to come out in the same place again.
Got it. Okay. So I think with that, like, I imagine, we talked about like Anar having the, Kessler syndrome, where like the planet's like atmosphere is like too littered and polluted to be able to land directly. But I think there's probably a beacon here, which is not super easy to get to because of this like Kessler effect. And I'm imagining something like in this kind of ring of a shipyard, one part of it is almost like a portcullis, right? Like where there's like some sort of repulsor field or something where you can get on and off world. And this is probably where the beacon is like beneath, right? So
yeah.
I think in this scene, like where we open, We've also not seen like a ring, kind of like spacecraft before. So
you got a lot to invent here.
Well, like the fleet of the ring is a lot of recovered craft, right? Like of other things. And so I imagine what we see as the camera opens is, out of this like subspace slip, I think we kind of like lurch into static reality as a kind of like hulking frigate sort of manifests here in real space. I think it probably has like a, like the insignia of the ring somewhere on it, like maybe on the front, like an eye. And I'm the kind of pull in my head is something like the like Rebel Alliance frigates in like Star Wars, where like the rebels are jumping on these kind of things that look like Hallcraft, right? Like they have like cargo in there. And I think as our camera like pans on this frigate arriving, you start to see smaller craft kind of break away and like falling off of kind of the bottom of this like cargo vessel is I think we kind of get like a snap cut to like some sort of like docking rig, maybe carrying out on an arm, like, and dropping mechs, like, jettisoning essentially. And I think there's probably, the company, the Boar, is like lined up ready to go in this like docking thing. So we see them kind of like drop off here into space and kind of ignite thrusters. I think cutting to the cockpit here, this is a significant moment because this is Rhodes' kind of like full command, where he's actually, endorsed and kind of sitting in this like general role. And I think as the camera opens, you see him kind of like issuing the game plan, right? Like to the company, the Boar here. We've got a couple here, like Rents, Scepter, Anthem. Hold the L3 Lagrange point while we get out here. Our contacts on the ground with the Shipbreakers Union are moving to mobilize right now. We have to hold this position just long enough to get them onto the frigate, and then we'll leap back through the beacon's gate. I think it's like at this point, like where, I think you see this action starting to happen. 3 of the company, the Boar, are out, coming towards this Lagrange point. I think Rhodes is backed up by another squad mate. And I think as this is starting to happen is where we're seeing like, some of the alarms starting to go off, like in the ring superstructure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, cut to images of like, armored Concordat troops, members of the Aster Legion, someone like hitting an alarm panel, and like the interior lights of a like structure in this ring starting to flash red, right?
Let's go a little further. Like, I think the ring actually like starts to change, right? Or like it's, I imagine this whole kind of shipyard apparatus is like fairly like modular. It's a construction unit, so stuff is maybe pulling back.
Concordat ships like breaking away and then getting shot down as they're starting to escape the ring before they can mobilize for combat, right? I imagine Company of the Boar, right? If this is like ring tactics, right? It's fast and dirty and mean. And so it's, before like the Concordat like troops stationed here can really realize what's happening, right? You've got these mechs plunging into the sides of ships, planting explosives and pulling away, and like,
yeah, hell yeah, that's cool.
It's that Concordat trooper hitting like the alarm button, and then there's a whole like rupture right next to him, and he's sucked
that's
out.
Cool. Yeah, that's like the scene is like it's just long enough for him to hit the button, and the bulkhead depressurizes, right? Yeah, I think we like cut back, and you're starting to see these like kind of plasma lances just like cutting through space here. I think it's just kind of suddenly it's just full chaos, right? Like this is the frigate opening up turbo lasers onto the planet, and what we're really trying to do here is just kind of hold this line like to keep a path clear so that they can get to the frigate and get out. And I think as you're starting to see some of this like Concordat movement, like maybe the other Spire ships in the fleet are like starting to kind of move and counterattack. You can see the shipbreakers, these like liberated ships starting to kind of like make their way towards the atmosphere. And I'm going to say it like moves. I love the idea of like the other mechs in the squad, like kind of, I don't know, with like some sort of like hyperdense knife thing, just like tearing into the sides of these things and like moving to the next one. Like this is what it would look like if you had mechs fighting spaceships, right? Like
there's a weapon in Armored Core 3 that's called like the what's it called? It's like the pile driver or something, but it is just this like giant like javelin that gets like explosively like launched from this giant bulky gauntlet that your core can have. And I do like the idea of like hitting the sides of these ships, discharging these like explosive lances into them, and then pulling away, right? Like that kind of like guerrilla like hit and run tactic I think makes a lot of sense.
As this is happening, I think like we're probably also getting like quick cuts back to Rhodes like really kind of showing. We haven't really seen this in this game anyway, but The redshift is able to put out like power in a way that a normal machine cannot. And I think also we've never seen it in the game in space, but it's almost like this is what it was really intended for, because it is like almost like gliding through the air. Well, I guess there's no air out here, but you're like a fish in water, right? Like I think it's fluttering from one side to the other of this ring. We're kind of just seeing with the particle lance kind of just tearing through some of these other spacesuits.
Like a squad of Caesuras. I'm thinking very much of like Gundam Wing here, and the way that the
totally.
Gundams in that series are able to just mow down like the mobile dolls. Right. Like squads of Caesuras just getting cut down by this mech that is just swooping back and forth across like this kind of field of battle.
Yeah. And I think like as this is going on, like, cutting to inside the cockpit, I don't know how much Rhodes has like really been up in front of the Concordat over the last, like couple of years. Fleeing Feldspar, I think finding his way into the ring is probably doing more like community sort of stuff, right? Or like defend from, I don't know, like I said, but this is a expeditionary fleet. And I think Rhodes inevitably is like drawn back to Calathil, right? Like memories of Calathil kind of like run through his head, thinking about being in a Concordat War College, like where he would have been. Could he have been on the other side of this battle line had things gone differently? And thinking back to Calathil being like a justiciar, like an arbitrator of, like a constable on Feldspar. Like Rhodes would have been the person pressing the alarm button, like had things stayed where they are. But now it's different. Like the terms have changed. The things they're fighting for are different. And I think there's probably like a surge of confidence, right? Like that this is starting to get back, right? Like, or starting to kind of like have proven a point. And I imagine at some point in this is where they run into real friction, right? Like the action here is stalled, I think, probably by the arrival of, Hyacinth in some way, shape, or form. You can fill in. I mean, what's your idea?
Right. Maybe it's like things have been going really well for a minute, and then one of the shipbreakers ships, right? One of the ones that's making this mad dash to get to the ring frigate and escape. There's like a garbled message over the comms, and it explodes.
Mm-hmm.
Right, cut to like feed from the sensors, and like standing on a piece of the wreckage of that ship, we see two armors. One of them, I think it's a humanoid, but it's got very thin limbs, in this armored, almost kind of like scale mail, like these overlapping plates. Its legs like pointed blades. I imagine it has a like long neck. Echoes here of like the comprehension of grace, but instead of ending in like a humanoid head, we see it ending in like just a perfect glass sphere for the mech's face. And it has these huge ceramic panels that normally lay over its shoulders like a cloak, but that have been thrown back now like moth's wings, right? Like spread out with this kind of hypnagogic, like colorful display on their interior. And there's like a shot fired from one of like the cannons of the frigate, and it should connect directly with the mech, but instead in this there's this bright iridescent splash of color. It sprays over the field it's created in front of it. And this is the weight of ascension. This is Hyacinth Corren's mech. And I think next to that mech, there's a secondary one, right? This like big, bulky, heavily armored machine that, I think looks also, like knightly, right? Like a figure in armor with, I think, kind of like a big crowned like head unit, a like long purple, like a cloak flutter, not fluttering, I guess, because there's no wind in space, but like trailing behind it.
No, it's fluttering. It's like whatever, like how they did the moon landing,
Yeah. And, holding, I imagine in my head, just like a giant, like two-handed broadsword that it has driven down into like the bridge of the ship it's on.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, Abaddon Spare in the Forbidden Passage, right?
Oh.
It is the two of them, right? It is mentor and apprenticeship, like leading the fight back to protect this legion and stop these rebels from escaping.
That is cool. Also, like I like the idea that, well, if we take it like, whatever, this ship that was departing just cleaved in half, and like the inertia is like still carrying them forward, like as they're, on the edge of this thing, still kind of smoldering. Since we're kind of in space, I'm going to take full advantage of this like 3-dimensional like battlefield. And I think, we probably get like some of this. This is also very like Char's counterattack is like, kind of zipping from these like pieces of debris, right? Like in above and beside and like kind of all sides as this, I think almost like a barge, like moving on inertia, just like kind of continues towards the frigate. Does Rhodes know? He would have never seen the Weight of Ascension, right?
No, he wouldn't. So it'd probably be Hyacinth who would come over the line first, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rhodes is probably moving to intercept, right? Like at this point where, I think Rhodes clocking very high right now, right? Like firing on all cylinders. This is kind of like battle meditation. Like he's kind of just probably put down like 50 to 100 machines, right? Like is kind of a perfect killing wind right now. And I think is kind of afterburners, lit, particle lance at the side, kind of moving through space at this incoming debris with these two machines on it.
And then cutting through it like cold water, like a voice from the past. I think just his name, right? Just Rhodes.
Mm-hmm. This is probably, anime like cross screen.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just the mouth on one side, just the eyes on the other, right? And I think, yeah, like being splashed with cold water is perfect. Like, and I think if Rhodes had hair on his arms, they'd be like standing on end. And I think it's almost like a halting, wide-eyed moment of like.
And I think the move I would imagine here, right, is in that moment where Rhodes halts. It's like one of these wing panels kind of flicks forward, and a piece of debris from one of the destroyed ships comes like flying through the mess to like collide with the side of the red shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
No mercy here, just immediately taking advantage of it, using these fundamental fields to hurl this like kind of giant piece of debris at the red shift.
Yeah, I think it topples like end over end, right? Like, and as some of this is like, like blows the thrusters here to like stabilize or something. Back on the comms, still alive. Then, surprised you made it this far.
Given the gift of God's purpose, this is what you do with it.
Boy, I think he kind of just laughs. Which God?
The one who made us. Another piece of debris thrown across the field at Rhodes.
Right. Another kind of like tumbling dodge. Oh, Hyacinth. No builder made you, the Concordat did. And I think, I think with that, probably actually cool move. I'm just going to like whip the particle lance like in that direction. I'm going to say it probably has some kind of like return mechanism or something else, but I think hurls it like kind of through space towards this. So just so I have the mental picture right, the Weight of Ascension with this glass domed like face is kind of in the center of like petals, like a flower.
Yeah, it's these wing panels that normally fold forward over like a cloak. But yeah, flower is a good metaphor, right? Like I think it's like 8 of them, and then when they're behind it and spread around, yeah, they are almost like a flower behind it.
Right, like somewhere between moth wings and flower. Okay, so like I think maybe Rhodes is like not going for a kill here. I think is just trying to cleave some of those panels. And I think the skirmish kind of continues, right? Like there's probably some sort of like cutting back and forth here. What the camera would see, I think, is that, and in fact, probably what the other members of the Company of the Boar are like seeing is, God, they do it. I just watched Gundam Wing, so it's like in my head a lot, but they do this thing that's like when others are spectating to Gundams fighting, they're just like darts of light.
Yeah, they're moving so fast that like the other pilots can't keep up with what's happening, right?
Right. And they know better than to like try and get in here. And so I think this kind of like continues for a bit until, I don't know, just like before, we've like kind of closed the distance. And at some point, I think Rhodes ends up with the particle lance back in the red shift's hands. And I think this, of course, comes to like crossing swords of some kind, right? I don't know. What's the Weight of Ascension have in Suite?
Right. I don't have anything defined for a bid here for it, right?
Well, maybe it's like not quite like melee as much as these. What if these like fundamental field generators are the thing preventing?
Yeah, like these blasts are coming in and they're hitting like these like force fields that are summoned and then break against the force of it. And to bring in this my other bid, this like chronometric response accelerator, right? I think we get the interior cut of the cockpit that Hyacinth is in, which I think looks alien from like some of the other cockpits we've seen, right? I think like covered in like writing, like on the machine pieces that we would recognize as like first era writing, like runic writing, right? The same stuff that Concordat has elsewhere. I imagine scrolls hanging down from like the pinned to the interior walls of the cockpit. And I think, he's starting to get like alerts. Like the system can't keep up with the pace of the combat that's happening, right? It's trying to predict him, and that's how these fields are catching the particle lance in time, but it's getting overloaded. It's trying to predict too many attacks at once. And so I think we see that shift in the battle as it starts to slowly edge in favor of the red shift here.
Mm-hmm.
The chronometric response accelerator can't allow the weight of ascension to keep up with the like fierce volley of attacks that the redshift's able to launch at them. And I think probably almost, it's like, it's got to be sound almost whiny, right? Like there's like a moment where Hyacinth comes over the line again, like voice breaking, like, we could have had a future together. We could have done something great. You stole this from me. And like, a big blast from one of the field generators that I think just misses the redshift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Hyacinth's getting sloppy in his counterattacks. His dodges are getting worse.
And I think like at maybe that chrono, are we bidding to destroy each other's stuff?
So the two things that still need to be destroyed, Calthiel Ket as a mentor, and Abaddon Spare. And I think I know how Abaddon Spare probably goes, right? Which is like another voice cuts over the comm, I have to imagine. And I don't know how you want to play this, but I got to imagine at the point that there's like, this second mech, this armored mech with the sword, it's probably like voice over the line, like, Hyacinth, remember your training, focus. Don't give in to emotion. And it's, that this second Concordat mech like arriving on the scene. As Hyacinth is kind of losing control a little bit.
I think maybe, as this is like happening, the chronometric like response unit is hitting that overwhelmed point. Like it is, the predictive engine fails for like a moment, right? And I think this is a, kind of like classic anime, like right behind you, and I think the redshift has a moment where the weight of ascension is caught off guard, like, and it is behind it, and it is, I think, the redshift is like kind of driving downwards, almost like between its legs, kind of driving the spear downwards. And I think what I'm trying to do here is get in between these cloak panels that are like mounted to the back and shoulder and the machine. And I think in this opening, like manages to connect it and would kind of cut back across, Feldspar had a future. You were given grace and you took it. Driving the spear point like between these panels and the weight of ascension, I think like there's like a quick scene of like the hand like twisting the particle lance, right? And I think there's like a crackle of this like fundamental energy as these two fields are like interacting, right? From a distance, probably really bright, like it looks like a star almost. How does it feel to have tasted the ashes of your homeworld, knowing it burned at your hand? And I think with that, like twists, right, and like pulls at least one of these weight of ascension's panels off. What I'm trying to do here is disable it.
Yeah.
Just briefly. And I think like as we're kind of like tilting here in space, like I think both thrusters cut. We're just kind of like idling, drifting, as Rhodes might say, now I'll show you what I've built. And I think the command goes to like the company of the boar, like these remaining guys on the outside, to all descend on Abaddon in like a kind of coordinated attack, right? Like they're probably from these like three angles near the frigate, and are going to try and like kind of dogpile on Abaddon while he's watching.
So Hyacinth's mech is like kind of like disabled there, watching as his mentor like
briefly, right? Like I think in this fundamental like energy field clash, like you can see both of our machines are like the lights are down for a second, right? Like both of them are overwhelmed. And I think in doing this moment anyway, is my bid to destroy at least Calthiel is I think like this is the Rubicon for him, for Rhodes, right? Like there's no going back from this point. There's like not a point where the Concordat says, just return it to us and we'll adopt you into the system. Like this is both an ideological destruction and the memory of this, training.
What if we like flash back here to a moment of like both of them younger, like sparring or something, with Calthiel like looking over them, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean, like looking at his two apprentices.
Oh, that's perfect. And I think like in this moment, like maybe it's flashback to Feldspar and they're training with like staffs or something.
Yes.
And the position is the same, right? Is like Hyacinth is on the ground, Rhodes like has the spear kind of like over, and I think as this like flashback's like coming to a close, it's like the same now yield, right? As this moment is playing out.
And then, yeah, right. I mean, I think, if this is a destruction of Abaddon Spare, probably this one big heavy mech with like this large sword trying to fight against these four other mechs that are darting in and out, like poking at it. And I think, intercut with like Hyacinth at the controls, like sensors active, being able to see his mentor losing this battle, but not able to intervene. And I mean, I don't know how much more there is in this scene, right? I think probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think the company, the boar, like you kind of watch Abaddon with this big, heavy broadsword thing, but is just kind of getting picked apart, right? Like there's too many of them. They're different. They're machines built for speed. And I don't know, like I think even maybe as these machines are like both stalled, like the radio's out for a minute. I don't know if Hyacinth is like, if he screamed, you wouldn't hear it, right? Like, as I think you kind of like see that. And I think from our vantage further away, there's like these little darts of light where you see the company the boar exit and then a like fusion reactor explosion, right? As like Abaddon presumably kind of like blows up just off screen. And I think maybe we can call it here on that scene. You got anything else to add?
Well, there's one last thing we have to do.
Oh, yes.
So once every bid is accounted for, the winner gets one last bonus before ending the scene. They get to cause harm or seize resources, depending on what they want most right here, right now. And so seizing a resource, you can kind of define something on your data file. It could be something in one of the existing categories, or it could be like a brand new thing. I seized the resource of fundamental apprenticeship last time. Mm-hmm. Or alternatively, if you cause harm, you can immediately place a destroyed bid that matches what you are doing to a pilot. And you just place it on there. And that also doesn't have to go into a blank space. It can be like a new thing that you just, kind of like whatever you want to add here.
How do you feel about, this is totally an open question because I don't know how, if the like fundamental field generators are a big part of the weight of ascension, I'm not going to destroy it. If that's the center point of the mech that you're like cooking on. So we can leave those if you want to. I thought about destroying it just because I did damage to it, but otherwise I think I'm going to declare like an extra resource.
What did you have in mind for seizing? I mean, I like them as like a mechanic, but that's not the end of the world, obviously. It does mean I have to think of a different thing when it shows up next time, which is also always fun.
Oh, so I declared on your data file.
So you can either seize a resource like you can put on either of our data files, I believe, or you can place a destroyed bid on my data file. This is interesting. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. When you cause harm, let me reread this. When you harm someone, they must immediately place a destroyed bid that matches what you are doing to them. You tell us what you want to do to them, but they decide what to bid to meet your demand. For example, if you ruin the other pilot's reputation, then they need to place a bid that matches that. So you kind of tell me fictionally, if you want to cause harm to me, you tell me fictionally what the harm you're causing is. I decide what the bid is that I place, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think what kind of like happens here is like this mission is successful for the ring, right? Like, and I think Hyacinth is put here kind of like as a symbolic barrier, right? Like this is, I'm sure the Concordat like knows why they dispatched him when they did, and it failed. It's like a slap in the face. He's humiliated in front of his own legion. I think this is like probably something really deep seated, right? And I think while the redshift would recover from this like fundamental field friction, I think the weight of ascension doesn't, right? Like or whatever's like disabled here is it's tumbling through space, kind of watching this fleet like leave, and Hyacinth has to go back to home base, right? Like, and kind of tail between his legs or something. So I don't think it's quite like a demotion, but essentially like humbled, right? Or insulted. I don't know what you would like kind of use the language for, but my thought here is that this is kind of like one of those wounds that hasn't healed for the next century.
Yeah. Okay. Let me think about what that bid is then. Oh, you know what I'm going to put on? I think that I'm going to put on, the bid I'm going to put here is a reputation, which is a like rising star. I think Hyacinth, before the death of Abaddon and before the defeat here, was kind of on like a fast track towards like becoming, like a beloved, maybe not beloved is the right word, but like a well-respected, renowned figure amongst the Concordat, right? Was like, was in line to become kind of a heroic figure in the Concordat mythos. And I think that that defeat here changes that. And, we haven't talked about it a ton, but we know that eventually Hyacinth is going to become a member of the Order of the Oculi, right, which are these kind of like the secret police of the Concordat. And I think that those people have a similar reputation that, in like police dramas, right? Internal affairs are always like the cops that every other cop hates because they prosecute other cops.
Right.
And that is where Hyacinth is going to end up, right? The Order of the Oculi spend as much time hunting down relics other people have stolen as they do persecuting crimes within like the Myriad way, right?
Right. So this is like something that changed his trajectory.
We have never like done like a hard definition of what Concordat ranks are, but I've referenced paladins a few times, and I think paladins are kind of like the highest kind of military rank that a Concordat thaumaturge can achieve. They are, figures of almost like poetic myth in a lot of ways, right? They get like, unique names, they get like these kind of relic machines, and they get a lot of honor. And it's important to me. I've never called Hyacinth a paladin in the show thus far because I think he never gets to become one.
Yeah.
By becoming a member of by becoming an intercessor, right? That's what he is now, an intercessor in the Order of the Oculi. He lives a life in the shadows of the Concordat, right? Ideally, most people don't know who he is or why he's there when he's doing things. And so, yeah, I think the defeat here, the destroyed bit, is Rising Star. He's no longer a prodigy, and he's going to become something different now over the next however many decades because of the defeat suffered here. And presumably this defeat then leads on into most of those ships escape, right? It is a stunning defeat at the NR shipyards because Hyacinth and Abaddon couldn't hold the line.
Yes, I think even like the, disorder in this moment like leads to even more of like a win than the ring was expecting, right? Like the fleet is, twice the size of what it was before. This is like a significant military action, and cool. Yeah. So I think I won that. That makes us that's the reward, as I sundered your reputation, and that brings us to the end, right?
Brings us to scene 3, yeah.
Okay.
The war is coming to an end, and everyone knows it. What they can't agree on is who will win. You know this means you'll be seeing that pilot again soon. They would never give up the chance to settle this once and for all, and neither will you. Answer the background questions for your pilot, then set the scene together, then follow the special instructions for the Scene 3 auction. So background questions. The first one here. What does your pilot want from the other player's pilot?
At this point, like in the narrative, the feldspar that Rhodes fled is no longer there. Rhodes wants what Hyacinth cannot give him, which is like an alternative. Like, he took his homeland away, right? I don't think that Rhodes wants vengeance, but wants Hyacinth to see as clear as he can, right? That he's not seeking something just, and like there is no justice coming in the builder, right? Like the Concordat is a falsehood, that what he's striving for will only cause more death and destruction.
And then, yeah, right. I think there's a very, very easy answer for this question, at least on the surface.
Like a
right?
one-word one?
Yeah. It's redshift, right? It's the redshift. But I think, like, you're right, that is like the surface answer to a deeper answer, which is that, fundamentally, lowercase f here, Hyacinth does not understand how Rhodes cannot see, right? That this is the thing that they were meant to do, and that every deviation from that is like an existential failure, right? We were built to do one thing, to pilot these machines from the place that we were born, and you have taken that and you have squandered it. And I think that's what Hyacinth wants more, is for Rhodes to understand that, right? Like, because I think, in Hyacinth's mind, what is the ring, right? But like, people squabbling to survive. There is no purpose there besides just survival, and that's not enough for Hyacinth, right? The world should have a purpose, and like that is what having the redshift is for Hyacinth, is like, like I said, being the leading edge of the blade, cutting through the veil to find the builder. And every moment that he's not doing that, right, it is shameful and like a deep abject failure. So I think he wants Rhodes to understand.
And I think, at this point, probably it's like, he's just had years of simmering resentment, right?
The montage we could get here, I imagine, is like, one, it's the dressing down Hyacinth gets right after that battle, right? It's like why did you rush in to confront that pilot? You could have like picked off their ships. They wouldn't have escaped with half as many if you had like stayed focused. And then it is, years of doing like dissatisfying work, kind of like working on like the sidelines probably for a long time.
Yeah.
Like his entire career trajectory upended by the failure in that one battle. And so yeah, that resentment simmering and building with each kind of like perceived injustice.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can go back and recut this montage when we know where Act 3 like takes Hyacinth, but I imagine this is like, scene of him in some trenches on some awful planet, right?
Not in a mech at all. Yeah.
Right. Raising some flag like on a desolate world. Like another scene of him, I don't know, getting mixed up in some weird thaumaturgy, like some other, medical tent healing, whatever this like takes us to. I think Rhodes, you kind of get the same thing of, which is like, instead of that dressing down, Rhodes is greeted by cheers, right?
Yeah.
And is like
great.
boosted up on the shoulders of his comrades in like a great hall, hung with the banners of a dozen worlds, right? Like, and you see the Sem Bellwether stories, right? Like the first of that stuff coming out, and like I think as Rhodes's ascent like grows in the telling, right? Like I think so too does like Hyacinth's fall.
Oh yeah. Until in my mind, there's like a room in a temple somewhere, and someone comes forward to Hyacinth holding like a polished mirror that reflects nothing, right?
Mm.
When you look into it, you see nothing, right? And that's like the ominous musical sting, like end of montage, right? Like at his absolute lowest, the people that even like the members of the Concordat themselves hate, right, find this guy and say, here's someone we can use. So the second question for background questions here. What would you think of each other if you had met in more peaceful times?
Well, we did meet in more peaceful times.
Yeah, right.
What would I think of each other? What would we think of each other? I think that Rhodes and Hyacinth have had a kind of like uneasy camaraderie, right? Like, and I think as boys, as I don't know what a young synthetic like exactly looks like, but when they were in their youths, I think were friends, right? Like, and even before the Concordat like showed up, I imagine they were kind of like lifelong, at least like acquaintances. And it's not a huge world. We don't have to go that far into it, but I think they've known each other a really long time.
Yeah.
And they were friends once. I think they were almost like brothers in a way. And I think that Rhodes, even like when they clash and when he wins, still kind of has like a profound sadness about Hyacinth, because I think Hyacinth does it to himself a little bit, but like Rhodes did this to him, and I think that's a weight he carries.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Is it different for Hyacinth? I think my only difference in my answer is that I think probably Hyacinth would have found something else to be jealous of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's maybe this is like a thing that's at the root of some of like all of this, right? Is that I think Rhodes has a freedom about him or an easiness about him that like Hyacinth has never had. And that I think that even if they had stayed on Feldspar, if the Concordat had never arrived, like maybe that kind of resentment or that kind of jealousy would have still been there. Maybe not as magnified, maybe not as, maybe it would have never turned to violence in the way that it is now, but like, I think that maybe always was there. Who knows? Maybe they would have resolved it, right? If they had a lifetime, but I think that seed was there before anyone ever stepped into an armor.
I've also wondered with Hyacinth before is like, had he not put all of his eggs in this basket, like this was the bet, right? Like that this was his kind of like ability to move up the ladder. Mm-hmm. And if it hadn't been this, like what could he have been, right? Like, but it's too late now. Like he's gone all in on the Concordat. There's no alternative to that,
Which segs great into the next the final background question. If you did leave the war before this final battle, what would be waiting for you?
A momentary peace, maybe. I think Rhodes feels that the Concordat will spread like a sickness across this galaxy, and it may be a few years, it may be a few decades, it could be a couple centuries, but the Concordat inexorably shows up. And so I think for Rhodes, if he left the war, would maybe find some passing respite, but ultimately what would be waiting is this conflict. Like there is no escape.
I think it's not dissimilar for Hyacinth, because I think a thing Hyacinth knows and speaks about in a way that is like from the perspective of like the celebrated and even in his later disgrace still kind of respected, if in a more fearful fashion, like pilot, everyone in the Concordat, under the way it has been organized and constructed, every life serves like the divine purpose, the final quest. The universal symbol for the Concordat is the seven-spoked wheel. Like philosophically, everyone in the Concordat turns the wheel, from like the lowliest farmer, right, to like the paladins on the battlefield. But the farmers don't get the glory, and they don't get like the benefit either. And so I think Hyacinth knows that if he left the war and stayed in the Concordat, right, it would still be working towards the end goal, but with none of the benefit, none of the luxury, or the like. Most importantly, none of like the honor or respect that he gets from being a thaumaturge, from being a soldier. But it would still be just turning the wheel.
Yeah, and it's also like below his ability, right? Like, he could. I don't think that Hyacinth would be cool with being a pencil pusher or a farmer or a maintenance guy.
He spent like 50 years becoming a battle wizard. No one has taught him how to do like taxes.
Nobody's gonna go be a developer after that.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn to code. I want to cast space magic.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Okay. So we're in scene 3. We're setting the scene. Scene 3 is the final battle, the turning point of the war. Feel free to use one of these suggestions to set the scene for the final encounter, or come up with your own. The book gives a couple, like, in the heart of the largest battle this war is seen, or alone, just the two of you in a desolate place. I think we both know what this kind of conflagration point is. We've talked about it in the past as like a pretty defining moment that drove Rhodes away from like his very prominent status in the ring in a like notable disaster, I think, where this like scene will kind of be set. I forget. So if I won the last one, who we're bidding and then we decide?
It's so each player may raise a maximum of 3 times. Each player must bid to define when they buy in, as usual, but any other number of bids may be bids to destroy. So, let's talk about the scene a little bit, and then we can do the auction. But like, so I think like you said, we've referenced this before. We've pointed to it. I think that this third scene, if this is what we're still down for, it's probably what we've referred to as Orcus 5, right? Which is the incident where we know Rhodes lost control of the Redshift in a way that ended up leading to the destruction of a space station or a space colony. We haven't really defined exactly what Orcus 5 was per se.
Mm-hmm.
But it led to like a lot of death and destruction, and it was enough to make Rhodes like quit. This was like what led to Rhodes going to Imber and retiring, basically, up until the start of our campaign.
Yep, I think Orcus 5 is a colony around like a star. And
what if it's like a gas giant?
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, Orcus. There's like probably a handful of them, right? Like this is also Gundam, like they're all at the Lagrange point. But I think this is like one of the kind of like largest conflicts in like the history of the Ring and the Concordat, like skirmishing across this galaxy. I just think it's probably like worth noting, maybe we haven't like said it out loud, at least in my mind anyway, everything that we've seen in this game is like in a different sector of space than Imber, right?
Yeah.
Like this is like, we're not close by. Like this is the stuff you hear in the HoloNet or read in, some bellwether books, but like it's not like this is happening in the same star system or anything.
No, Imber we've described as being a kind of a somewhat remote system, not very well connected to a lot of its surrounding ones. And so it's like kind of a back world. Besides the beacon there, I don't imagine that the system that Imber is in has much else worth attracting attention besides Imber itself. Historically, where we're at this point, maybe that we're like at the earliest stages of like the Commonwealth just starting to trickle onto Imber, like independent, small companies, not even like as like a large effort yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the NPCs that we have met so far have still not yet been born. The main characters of our other campaign have not yet been born, like at this point in history.
Right. Let's maybe color a little more on Orcus 5 here, because I think why this is a such like a powder keg moment, I think, is that Orcus 5 is a like massive space colony, like it almost like planetary size. I think maybe it's also a first era colony that like it's not
has been inhabited by.
Yes, exactly. Like it's a kind of like deep space like relic. So to the Concordat, a miracle, right? Like something to be discovered and like kind of brought back into the fold. But for the Ring, this is like a contact scenario, right? Like so for Rhodes, this is watching what happened with Feldspar, and like has a moment to try and stop that from happening, right? Like maybe there's some initial scout, some initial contact, but like this is an expeditionary fleet, or even more than that. Like I don't know what's one level above like an expeditionary fleet, like a siege engine. There's like a Concordat like siege engine here.
So you're saying that Orcus 5 is like a independent colony?
Yeah, I think like that there's maybe like, you know, some planets around or something, but people have been living on Orcus 5. It has its own, you know, culture, its own inhabitants that are kind of like not Ring, not Concordat, like they've been largely like out of kind of interstellar politics.
Yeah.
And I think are like known to the Ring as the Ring are known to them. And probably not unlike the kind of early days of Imber's colonization, right? Like there's probably some off-worlders here.
Can I make like a pitch? What if, I don't like, it's like some like Cloud City shit. What if there is like a kind of like, you know, mining apparatus on Orcus 5, right? Something that is like mining the planet, like the gas planet below or something. Like,
Sure.
Right? There's a resource at play here, because there always is.
Right.
Like there are machines on Orcus 5 that like process like the gases from the gas giant below into some kind of like useful commodity, and the people on this station have like, you know, the little interstellar like communication their trade they have, right, is trading this good, right? You know, an entire, you know, a colony that's been built around like primarily, you know, societally, like the whatever they don't grow or like build themselves, right, is traded for with like the, you know, the fundamental properties of this gas that they collect.
This is what runs the beacons, right? Like you want to slip into hyperspace or something, you need this like kind of,
or it's like a fuel for fundamental generators, right?
Yep, perfect. Okay, I like that. Okay, so that's the scene, right? Like this kind of what did you say?
Like a reconciliation vanguard, like a kind of Concordat. Back to this idea of like tip of the spear, right? There's a Concordat force who has arrived to, you know, reconcile, but to kind of put Orcus 5 under its thumb in the same way that Feldspar was put under its thumb, right?
Yeah, and I think the scale of this vanguard fleet is, you know, more than what you'd see around a planet normally, right? Like this is huge amount of armament here. And I think by equal measure, the Ring is outgunned, right? Like there are not the same amount of resources available. And I think that the Ring has been here at Orcus 5, like helping them prepare for a defense. I think that like this is like the pull in my head is like, unfortunately, like the Matrix 2 or something, you know, they're like fortifying Zion. And I think this has looked like, even I think activating some of these kind of like first era defenses around it, right? Like, and maybe that's from, you know, the Ring's like knowledge of what else is out there. But I think this thing has like come online in like a different way than it has in the past.
Oh, I really like that idea that there are like first era defenses that are being like activated. You know, there are Ring scientists on Orcus 5 who are like, helping the people who live there, like, you know, turn on machines that have never turned on before. Kind of engaging like a militaristic aspect of this entire station that has like rarely ever been used.
Cool.
And so that's the scene. Yeah. So let's do we want to do our auction now? I think that's pretty good, right? And Rhodes presumably here to like lead the, you know, the like mechanized cavalry charge against the Concordat, right?
Yep, exactly.
You know, I think there's probably, like a philosophical kind of like idea floating around here, right? Which is like, this Vanguard is like an advanced fleet, but if we can bloody their noses enough now, it might dissuade the Concordat from like trying again, right? That's like one thing, you know, that works, I think, in the Ring's favor in its skirmishes against the Concordat is that the Concordat's forces are spread out across such a wide swath of the galaxy that I think often, you know, maybe this has been like a tried and true like tactic for the Ring historically, right? Is like, if you can put enough pressure on a place to make them think it's not going to be worth going down there or it'll be too difficult,
there's other worlds.
Right, yeah, exactly. It'll just wash over a different planet instead. All right, you can't stop them, you can't defeat them per se, but you can redirect the flood. Yeah, and what that means ethically for the places that you didn't choose to defend is, of course, a different question. But I think that's a good setup for what this is going to be.
Okay, so we've got this like massive space battle, one of the largest this war has seen as far as the Ring's concerned. Now it's time for the auction. So each player may raise a maximum of 3 times. And each player must bid to define when they buy in as usual, but any number of other bids may be bids to destroy, up to 3, right?
Correct. So let's, should we do our buy-in? Let's define something. What do I want to highlight in the scene? My buy-in here is a distinct look for Hyacinth. It's a personal resource. And it is cracked and shattered ceramic armor. We alluded to this in, kind of like the prelude to the opening of this episode and to like some of the previous discussions we've had. We've seen these 3 battles, or we're going to see these 3 battles by today's end. But I think this intervening period from that last fight we saw to now, I think we're talking another pretty decent time jump, maybe 25 to like years, maybe longer. It's the duration of Rhodes' career as a soldier.
Yep. I think that's like even maybe like 30-ish, 40. Like it's a couple of decades later.
And like you said, I think Hyacinth and Rhodes have crossed swords more than once in this intervening period, right? Like that last one we saw was their first reunion. I think there are many more reunions after that. And like you said, I think Hyacinth has been defeated over and over again and keeps, coming back, keeps like fighting, and I think it's always like with the weight of ascension repaired, upgraded in some way each time. But I think that we've started to see each time his armor, I know we talked about this before, his plating has his personal like synthetic, dermal plates have been replaced with Concordat ceramic ones, and they've been cracked and shattered and repaired together. But Hyacinth has kind of like very intentionally, very purposefully not had them fully repaired. Like he wears the scars of each loss that he has faced against Rhodes thus far. And so that is the first thing that I'm going to bid. That's my buy-in here.
I am, for my first one, I'm using a tactical specialty. I'm pulling up from my Beam Saber sheet again with like aggressive auto-targeting. And I think that Rhodes has like developed a reputation to essentially be like a one-man army on these like large scale conflicts, and that's exactly why he's here. I think he's both like kind of in a role kind of akin to like a commander or like a general, but is also like leading the charge, right? Like he is like on the front line because the Redshifts like capabilities in this context like can like essentially hold off like dozens more machines than the average frame.
Shall I raise first, or do you have one?
Yeah, I'm gonna raise to destroy. Or I'm bidding to destroy the Company of the Boar. I think does not survive.
Yeah, of course they don't, right? Oh.
Yeah.
I have like such a picture in my head. We haven't like given them a lot of description. I've just got this like kind of like, a very anime, but like this motley crew of like, weirdos, each in their own kind of custom machine that has like, very much a ring aesthetic. I feel like a lot of these machines are like parts from many different machines. There's definitely in my mind like one big dude, right? Who's like the jolly kind of guy who has like a big bruise over a machine,
There's a sick-ass sniper. There's like a really fast one. Yeah. There's, I'm trying not to think about them too much because occasionally when we're just like jamming on side characters, I'm like, fuck, that's a really cool squad. Like,
yeah, right? But there's like a different game, and maybe we could do this at some point. Like there's a whole different game of like, the Company of the Boar and like the missions that they ran.
Hey, that's mid-season break for you.
Yeah, right? That ain't bad either, yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, that's my bid to destroy there.
Okay, I think my second bid here, I have a signature maneuver here that I'm going to reveal, which is I'm defining it here. It is emerging from seemingly utter destruction.
Won't stay down.
Will not stay down. Seems like it should have been annihilated and then comes back up. Right.
Unfuckwithable.
Yeah, it's big zombie mech hours, right? Like getting hit by a blow that should have devastated it, and then like rising.
That's cool. I'm going to, for my second here, for signature weapon, I'm going to add a like directed like energy weapon. Something we haven't seen in the game, so I don't know where that ends up.
It's been a long time since Rhodes piloted the Redshift. Maybe some things are gone. Some things just need to be unlocked again. And maybe there's just some things Rhodes has been hesitant to use again since, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my thought too.
Yeah. So mine second, I will define again, I think, which is a unique customization, which is the Sigil of the Empty Mirror. And this is, I think, exemplified I described before the Weight of Ascension having like this, longer scaled neck terminating in like a glassy black sphere for a head. I think that is still the case, except instead of a glassy black sphere, it is now this kind of reflective, swirling quicksilver orb that has replaced the like kind of obsidian glass head.
Is that the cockpit?
For sure, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Everybody else is in the chest of their mech, but Hyacinth is definitely in the head of his. And so, it is this shifting quicksilver orb that maybe it's not even connected directly to the neck. Maybe it is like floating just above it in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The neck terminates in kind of like a cradle that isn't actually holding the orb. It's just like there suspended to, like right above it. And that is the sigil of the empty mirror. That is this customization, and it is a reflection of the new and particular powers within the Concordat and within the Order of the Oculi, which I think at this point in time, whether or not Rhodes knows it, I think Hyacinth has become inducted into that group at this point. And that was my second raise. So I think
I'm adding the alternate mode, which is something we haven't seen in the Beam Saber game. I'm probably not going to call it this when we're playing Beam Saber, but for an alternate mode here for the Redshift, I've just written fundamental capital F ordnance. This is like the kind of like latent ability of the Redshift to like channel the like raw fundament and becoming kind of like a manifestation of that.
Okay. And all right, so I just have one more. That's me.
Yep.
Maybe this is like this is maybe off. Does this conflict if I use mirrored portals?
Conflict?
With what we've established already? I don't think so, right?
No, I mean, isn't that like explicit what we've established?
We've established you could do it. I thought it was a little bit of a surprise that he did it, but I think it lines up. Maybe it's weird to see him be able to do it in person and in a mech. That was like a surprise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go with it. I think I'm going to define, this is kind of drawing on what we've already seen in the past as well. And this is like the first time it shows up and at a mech scale. I'll call this utility equipment instead of mobility system, because I think maybe the full mech isn't moving this way, but it is a way that like shots are redirected. I'm putting mirrored portals. I think that the Weight of Ascension, now that it has been blessed with the sigil of the empty mirror, is able to create these kind of like fundamental mirrored like portals that absorb or redirect enemy fire and are kind of able to let this thing move through deadly situations unscathed. So, we reread our bids out loud. That's the what the rules want us to do here. We reread our final bids and then we decide who made the most meaningful bid.
Yeah, so I'll go first. So I've bid a tactical specialty of aggressive auto-targeting. I've bid the alternate mode fundamental metamorph. I've bid my second signature weapon, directed energy weapon. And I've bid to destroy the Company of the Boar.
I bid a utility equipment, which is fundamental mirror portals. As utility equipment, I'm also bidding the sigil of the empty mirror as my unique customization, which is reflected as this kind of change to the head unit of the Weight of Ascension. I'm also bidding my signature maneuver, which is emerging from seemingly utter destruction. Emerging from seemingly utter destruction unscathed. I guess I'll add that as like a descriptor. And a distinct look here, which I think is cracked and shattered ceramic armor. And that is referring to Hyacinth, but I kind of like the idea that it, maybe this is cheating a little bit. I think it probably extends to the mech as well, right?
Right.
So with those final bids stated, we come back to it. We say, which bid is the most meaningful?
That's a tough one. I mean, I sort of think this is a really defining moment for Rhodes. Kind of like probably one of his. This doesn't end well for Rhodes, so I don't know if he wins that. But it's a big moment, one way or the other. So I'm not sure.
I think also Rhodes, right? And maybe this is just the gravity of being a main character, but we have an ongoing narrative. We know how meaningful each of these things, is about to become to Rhodes, is about to play out. Especially, I think destroying the Company of the Boar is very meaningful in thinking about what it means for Rhodes to be a part of another squad today, which we know, especially that in the context of the meta narrative of what we're doing right now is the story Rhodes is telling Carta and Desmond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this part of the story where Rhodes has to tell Carta and Desmond about like his ride or die squad mates who all didn't make it through, like on the biggest, like kind of most pivotal battle of his career. There's a weight there.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I have some ideas for how this plays out. So I'll say yeah, sure. Rhodes can win this one, although it's something of a tacit victory.
It's Rhodes doesn't win this, you win this. Peter wins this, and because Peter wins, you get to decide how the scene plays out, how it ends, and who walks away with the prize.
Yeah.
So again, that doesn't mean that Rhodes wins at the end of this day. So yeah, do you want to start it up? Do you know where we start here?
Yep, I think so. And I think this is, like the camera opens, I think, on the station, right? In this like space colony. And I think it's kind of like a torus ring, like the classic kind of like ring colony shape. But instead of being from like, I don't know, like Durasteel kind of glimmering chrome like you normally think of, I think this is like cut from, it's like rock, stone almost.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so I think the interior of this kind of looks like what we've seen with other first era relics. There's like almost like a sandstone white color. I think it is under glass or some kind of glass where there's like atmosphere is trapped. But, it's also, I think in this moment setting the scene, like it's strange and beautiful here, right? Like there, I think, are like bodies of water and waterfalls and forests. It looks like an 8th grade earth science poster, like of all the different like kind of biomes here. And I think that there are buildings and cities. And I think that like a kind of moment here is happening right like before we know the Concordat has like jumped into the system. This reclamation vanguard is here. I think we can even like see through the glass overhead like the blips of light as more and more of this fleet like kind of jump into the system. And so beneath this like canopy of flickering lights and the kind of like, I imagine here as this is beginning, there's even like a long shadow creeping across this like valley floor of the station itself, as the kind of, I don't know, one of these big flagships of the reclamation fleet like kind of moves overhead. And I think Rhodes is kind of giving a speech, right? Like we're here, you can see probably scores of frames in formation, right? Like in kind of like marching formation. Like we're here in front of this big airlock door, huge, right? All from this kind of hewn stone. And Rose is sort of addressing those that are here, and I think is flanked. He's not like a one-man army. This isn't like a top-down hierarchy. It's the ring, right? So I think like he is flanked by kind of elected delegates that each of these kind of standing units has chosen, and he's kind of addressing the crowd, right? And is, I think, kind of mirroring some of the things we've talked about, right? Like this station is something to be preserved. The Concordat drifts from one sector of space to the other, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Like to borrow the metaphor, right? Like it is like a flood. What we can do here is to repel this invasion force today, but they will be back. There has been no greater test of what you stand for here. Whether you know it or not, you are inheritors of a cosmological legacy that someone will take from you if you do not seize it for your own. We are not of your kind, and this drama has played out on a dozen systems in a dozen worlds. Rare is the opportunity to come together, and in our solidarity we find strength. Join me in carving a path to our future. I will be fighting for you, as are we all. And I think like this is kind of like this quiet before the storm, right? And I think like as this is kind of happening is like where you start to see people kind of mounting up. I think even as this kind of like shadow passes over, like as kind of Rhodes is bringing this piece together, you can start to hear distant rumblings as the station is like getting shelled, right? Like from this reclamation fleet. And I think like as this is kind of happening, like maybe Rhodes is actually giving this address from like halfway up the redshift, right? And he's like, there's more at stake here than you could know. And we've fight only to see tomorrow, right? And I think that's like as the airlock doors like open, right, and this kind of defense force starts to mobilize, and I think it's like not plunging out into space because I think that Orcus 5 like has gravity on its exterior, like it's large enough and it's spinning. And so I think that like the outside of the station also kind of looks greebly a little bit, like maybe like a I'm kind of imagining like Hopi cliff dwellings, like right, like these like stone structures are also on the exterior, and I think that there are like first era artilleries, right, like that are, I think, firing off like kind of like jets of like plasma, right? It's this kind of like weird, it's not like what you'd normally see from this kind of like munitions. These are like weird things. And so you see this like splash of plasma, like kind of washing over some of these Concordat ships. Like weird, unusual kind of munitions happening here.
Firing for the first time in like an eon, right? Like, yeah, I like that a lot.
Cannonades not heard in a long time. I think with that, like as this kind of like force is mobilizing, Rhodes turns to the company of the Boar. Like this has been, I think they're much older than the last time we saw them.
Maybe not all the same people even, right? Like,
I think that's a great pull. Yeah, like it's probably bigger. The company of the Boar is larger, and I think some of the kind of like faces and frames that we saw before are missing. But there's probably 2 or 3, that were still there too, piloted by old men.
Yeah.
And I think the scale of this is what's probably the most striking thing in this scene, right? Like, this is our entire CGI budget, this is the season finale, and I think like Rhodes is talking to the company of the Boar as like we're all kind of like loading in, and is like, this fight hasn't been easy, and it's never going to get easier. All I'm asking is for one last ride. As I think they like kind of descend, right? Like this kind of like goes into the maelstrom. And again, like I said, like I think it's as kind of as far as the eye can see out into the middle distance here. There are just like flashes of light kind of happening all over the place. And I think I'll toss it over to you at that point. Like I think this is the opening salvos of this conflict here.
Cut to a ship hewn from like white marble, right? With spires rising up on it, right? This is like a Concordat flagship. It looks almost more like a moving city than it does like a vehicle. What if Warhammer 40K was like a little bit more Catholic? A little bit more Mormon, maybe also, right? Like this sparkling white. But yeah, I definitely I love this image of like, banners hanging off of the towers of this warship moving through space. And I think we get like, as the camera moves in on this ship moving forward, right? It's already like starting to fire salvos at the ring ships surrounding Orcus 5. I think like the mech physically standing on kind of the leading edge of the ship itself, like right on the exterior of the hull, like standing there and watching in the vacuum is the weight of ascension, right? Alone in the vacuum, I think audio here we get like we get the still shot. The cape panels still closed, not spread out in their kind of flower petal formation, lined with cracks now. And then, we cut to the interior of the cockpit where I think, extremely low in the mix volume-wise, right, is, the radio chatter of, the Concordat troops, marshaling their movements and, coordinating their plans. And it's clear Hyacinth isn't really listening, right? He's got the monitors in front of him. We can see what he's trying to find, what he's trying to track down in all of this.
He's looking for, one thing.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's, screens, big blown up screen, zoom in, highlight, shuffle off to the side, zoom in again, highlight, trying to pinpoint where Rhodes is on this battlefield. He knows he's here. He's come for him.
Right.
And I think in this moment, we can see Hyacinth doesn't care about this fight, right? For whatever Orcus 5 is, whatever this means, he's at a different place. He's at a place now where that's not why he's here.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we hear those orders shouted over the Concordat comms, but mixed solo, he can barely hear them because that's not what he cares. Yeah,
he's
right.
Switching it off.
Yeah. He does. He reaches forward and just turns off a comms unit, and suddenly the voices die, and it's just him. The blue light of the monitors cast against the white armor of his face, and each one of these cracks looks like a valley.
I like that.
And it's just him staring into the blue light, waiting for the ping.
Right. And maybe like the camera follows, right? Like to the screen. And I think, on this array of like, I don't know what the tech looks like, but on some kind of like clunky monitor thing, there's like, what you would expect. And then I think one of those signatures is putting out numbers that is like unmistakable, right? And I think camera like kind of goes from that bleeding into focus to, I think, like the redshift in space. I think flanked with the company of the boar, and this is like at probably the height of like martial power that Rhodes has like ever really commanded. I think we're seeing this like aggressive auto targeting where the redshift is almost like in a flow, right? Like it is like ballet or like jazz, right? Like it looks improvisational, but
this is where the music kicks in. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like almost like this, kind of like twisting and dancing like movement. I think just like cutting swath like through this first press of the invasion force. But I think that like on the 30,000 foot view, the ring is losing. Like it is not a symmetrical like response. Like we are outgunned, outnumbered. Even though the redshift is like holding this kind of sector here, like I think the Concordat is like cutting into the like doors of the station already.
Advanced units are starting to land on like the surface of the station. Yeah.
Probably some cool specialized mech for that,
absolutely.
The whole thing is like a saw blade.
And I think we're getting I have this image of like mechs holding like tower shields being launched from ships and basically like riding through the wreckage and the incoming fire. You know what I mean? With the shields held in front of them to protect them until they like collide with the station and then dismount and like draw out these cutter units, right? Like they're not even armed. They just have like the shields and then like these like powerful laser cutters to like start making their way in.
And these ancient armaments are like picking them off and it doesn't matter, right? Like the Concordat is like firing them out like machine guns. Yeah, I think that's really sick.
I mean, I know what I think, this is your scene. You play it how you want, but I think thinking about the company of the boar and thinking about Hyacinth, right? I got to imagine Hyacinth makes his way towards Rhodes, right?
Oh yeah, like from that moment of detection, I think we see, like the weight of ascension, I think just kind of like step off the front of the bow of this like marbled flagship and just kind of proceed through the dark. In the time, I think that the weight of ascension is crossing this like void of space, like to kind of close the middle distance. Probably from Hyacinth's perspective, and not Rhodes, most importantly, is they are being overwhelmed and cut off from reinforcements. Like this kind of the Concordat's focus has been on this front door. Rhodes, I think, is also kind of like lost in the flow. Like this is we've talked about it in game, but I think if we were playing Beam Saber, the rage engine is active like at this point, like the kind of like melding of like machine and pilot is probably, it's hard to tell where one stops and the other begins, right? Like the fluid motions feel like second nature, and as this is happening, I think that like what's kind of happening here is that the company of the boar and Rhodes are being encircled, right? Like and closed off from like escape.
And then I think it's got to be Hyacinth arriving. I imagine this is like I don't know. Let me pitch it, right? I kind of imagine like the members of the company of the boar seeing Hyacinth's approach and like, maybe not all of them, but at least some recognizing like, one, this is like this guy's here for Rhodes, and what Rhodes is doing to stop like everything else is too important to let him get caught up fighting this one other mech.
Yeah, and I think there's probably like some lesser, it's like a mini bosses, out here that are like, maybe holding their weight against the redshift, and we're like kind of seeing like that particle lance kind of tearing through some of these. Is your idea that Hyacinth is like picking off the company of the boar?
Yeah, I think he's approaching. I imagine it's kind of like, in my head, it's like, right? It's like, if Rhodes is out here with the aggressive auto-targeting, if he's taking down scores of machines, and maybe like, especially the old timers in the company, they know that like this is the guy that can get Rhodes's goat, that can like pull his focus away. And there's almost an element here of like, we can't let that happen. Let's stop him before he can get to Rhodes. What Rhodes is doing like on the battlefield, if there's any chance of like stemming this tide, we need the redshift focused on that and not on this guy. this guy who just keeps showing up. And so I kind of imagine it's like the weight of ascension, you said like mini bosses. I kind of like flipping it here where it's like the company of the boar are the mini bosses on the weight of ascension's way towards Rhodes.
Yeah, and I mean, also it took 5 of them to kill Abaddon.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure that Hyacinth hasn't forgotten. I think they probably have like an insignia, like kind of special, right? Like within that circle of the ring, there's, like a boar, right? Or like a tusk or something.
And of course, you're right. I know I didn't even think about it that way. Hyacinth's doing this on purpose. He's not going after Rhodes first, right?
Yes.
He arrives on the outer circle and he starts going after the company of the boar.
Yeah.
One by one.
I think Rhodes probably catches a moment of this, right? As he's like kind of coming up for air for a second, kind of scanning around, looking over his shoulder. And I think one of them, like probably one of the 2 or 3 that have been here since the raid on the shipyards, the moment it becomes clear is, are you still using the longsword?
Yeah, for sure. Why not? Yeah, right.
Something, sure, right?
Yeah, like and I think that's like the close quarters weapon. Like, is the longsword still held? And then the rest of it is like these fundamental field generators and these mirrored portals.
Right. I was gonna say not to put any words in your mouth or something, but I think this is like Rhodes looking over his shoulder as like looking at. I'm just gonna pull a name out here with like Scepter Century.
Yeah.
And a portal, I think, like opens behind him as his mech is just pierced from behind, right through the cockpit.
Yeah.
And I think like torn through. And I think in that moment, there's like a quiet in the cockpit, right? Which is like this din and this frenzy that he's been caught up in is suddenly broken by the appearance of 1, the death of a friend, and 2, it couldn't be anyone else. I think with that, I think like also like the kind of pile on around Rhodes, like Rhodes is known to the Concordat, and I think like more ships have even kind of like come to this section of the station and are even like bombarding like this area. So I think that like the area around Rhodes is just kind of like erupting in artillery fall, these like massive explosions. I think like chunks of the station are like breaking off, and I'm going to say a like particularly large, like, round goes off, right? And up to where this kind of sword just destroyed Scepter Sentry, I think there's like a very quick action, right? As Rhodes, in the redshift, kind of like leaps up chunks of this rubble, like right through space, kind of like leapfrogging. And I think up to a position of vantage is like looking for Hyacinth here. And in lieu of like being able to spot him, I think like this rage engine is fully active, like, and Rhodes is looking for a kill, and I think just draws this directed energy weapon, and like second nature, I think just opens it at one of these kind of I don't know what you call like a warship with all this artillery, right? And
a gunship.
Perfect. Yeah, one of these Concordat gunships, and the beam from this energy weapon is like starts narrow, but just carves like this wide dearth, and I think it almost like shocks some of the other onlookers as this thing, I think, just like carves like a hole through the middle of this gunship with like liquid metal dripping.
Yeah, right. Like everyone is stunned.
I think Rhodes is stunned also. That's never happened before.
I kind of have an image as this is happening, right? Like we cut to everyone stunned, and we cut to Hyacinth also like briefly stunned, but surrounded by the company of the boar, right? There's like 5 or 6 of them who are like around him now. They have like they have it closed on Hyacinth in the same way that Rhodes is getting like closed on in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And this in my mind is like a big, like 360-degree camera movement of, all 5 of these mechs trying to destroy the weight of ascension. And it's, shots being fired at it and instead hitting these like instantly summoned mirrored portals and being redirected, hitting mechs next to them.
Oh yeah, they just cannot land a blow.
Yeah, exactly. It's he's moving with like an effortlessness that mirrors the way that the redshift is doing it, but like not at the same scale. But it's like,
oh, but I love that. Like I'm sure like 1 or 2 of them like take out each other,
yes,
right? Like
exactly,
through these like mirrored portals. Like I think Rhodes is. Oh, I don't know where are we in relation to each other?
Getting closer, probably like distance, far enough that Rhodes isn't able to intervene as the rest of the company of the boar kind of like is, I think, piece by piece whittled down by Hyacinth.
Mm-hmm. I think it like quick camera snap back. like this is still kind of just raging. Rhodes in the redshift follows the trace of that rifle, I think, like thrusts directly through the hull of this ship. I think at this point can see, like in the HUD display, the lights are going out on the like comm beacon for the Company of the Boar. Like they're dropping.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think this like sets him into fury, right? Is uncontrolled. I think as he's like ripping through this like hole in the hull of the gunship, I think in like a quick turn, like swipes with the particle lance and it explodes, like the whole thing. And he screams, "Where are you? Show yourself." Because we've seen enough of these mirrored portals. He has to know he's nearby, right?
Yeah. Maybe this is, if you're cool with me ending the last of the Company of the Boar here.
Yeah.
And this is like also kind of working in my signature maneuver. I like the idea of like, this like the same big guy that we saw before. I don't have a name, but with like something like a big grenade launcher, kind of like hand, like this big explosive weapon, desperately firing it at like point blank range against Hyacinth. An explosion that will consume both of them. But like a kind of like final like stand against this person who has wiped out the rest of the Company of the Boar. Like close range, massive like bazooka explosion. We get like the screen turning to just like white and red color as his mech, is like evaporated by the force of the explosion, right? Kind of a scream, not to match Rhodes's. And then it's, just the smoke and the drifting pieces of mechs. And then rising up, the wings splayed out, the flower petals arranged behind it, the weight of ascension coming up and out of the smoke of the wreckage of the last member of the Company of the Boar. And, quiet over the line, but connected to Rhodes, just here. And it's like, it's a comms ping as well. It is like an exact pinpoint of like, here's where I'm at.
Right.
Can I pitch something?
Yeah. Maybe
this isn't the moment yet, but so we can cut it if it's not. But I think when we talked about you using the Rage Engine in Beam Saber, and we talked about you kind of picking up like the most minute, like fundamental signals and traces, what if the redshift it's like connecting to the first era artillery on Orcus 5?
That's exactly where I was going.
Suddenly all of those systems are connecting, yeah, right? Like it's like new connection acquired over and over. Suddenly the entire station is starting to respond as the redshift burns hotter. Maybe it's starting to get these connection pings.
Oh, totally. I think like that kind of goes from, okay, like Rhodes has the ping now, right? So this like kind of like, I'm even hesitating to like say Rhodes. This is like the redshift, right? Like turns and is just solely focused on destroying this thing. And I think we see that like directed energy rifle kind of just letting off like round after round. They're not as like explosive and huge, but it's like boom, 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 as the weight of ascension is maneuvering, like you can see it trailing. And I think what happens kind of in the background as these artillery are like picking off their own targets, you start to see them also focusing the same line of fire, right? Like whether Rhodes knows it or not, like they're bending to like the red shifts like will here. They're all kind of aiming at the same thing.
Oh, that's so good. They're not like firing at the ships that like they need to be targeting it anymore. They're
right.
Yeah.
It's like influencing the station's defenses, probably unbeknownst to Rhodes. And maybe even a couple of them like hit, right? Like it's, it's starting to get harder. But I think as this is happening, the kind of center of this torus ring, which, I think has like a kind of large, I don't know, I'm imagining the image in my head is like those kind of 80s like space telescopes that have the like gilded dome on top of it, right? I think something like that, like the center of this is something is happening here. And I think this center is like opening of whatever's like in the center of this station. And I think it crackles with like fundamental energy. And Rhodes is closing that distance. And I think this is like maybe where the redshift is, like living up to its name, like I think is changing, almost like bleeding into acceleration. Like its form almost seems like it's starting to kind of fall away, like into blurry at the edges. And I think this is like, maybe the distance is great enough. He knows where he is and is like, thrusting as hard as possible. Like this is the fastest he's ever moved. I think in the cockpit, like we can also see Rhodes has like, is clinging to the controls, but it's like the redshift is piloting him.
Yeah.
And I think some of that ceramic plating is even like falling off as he's moving through space.
cut to the interior of Hyacinth's cockpit, looking at the screens again, and just like under his breath, beautiful.
Of course, yeah. And the screen is like anomalous data, like error.
Exactly, yeah.
With that, Rhodes collides with, the redshift collides with the weight of ascension with the tip of a spear. And I think like as this is happening, like Rhodes just on the comms, right? Just, I think like, I don't even think it sounds like him. Like I think there's like voice modulation. Like it's kind of mechanical in nature, more so than even a synthetic.
Two voices speaking at once.
Oh yeah, totally. Like a diurnal sound. And he's like, just, why won't you die?
I think that first blow, right, probably like sends the weight of ascension like skittering, like breaks one of the panels in half, like one of the wing panels in half. This machine is not rated to go to deal with this, and it's like taking everything Hyacinth can to like stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And like his line, even I think like crackling, right, trying to break through the interference of the energy that like the redshift is putting out.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see what it can do.
Then witness. And I think like at that, and again, like it's this weird both voices thing.
Yeah.
And I think like, camera outside of the cockpits for a second here. And the redshift's armor plating has like fallen away or melted or changed. And I think like what we see is it's almost like flowing. The surface of the redshift has gone from kind of hard plating to looking like almost sinewy, almost like liquid. I think it looks sort of like a liquid, like abalone, like kind of coursing, like in currents. Like you can see it kind of traveling from shoulder to hand, from chest to feet, as this thing is almost, I think there's even like a distortion like around it, right? Whatever, like that blue light that comes out of nuclear reactors when they're like starting up. And I think like you can actually see it repelling space debris, right? Like stuff is like moving away from them in this sphere. And I think in the hand that's not holding the particle lance, the redshift extends and like full hand on the like, I forget what we called it, like the dark glass of its cockpit. And I think is like grabbing this, and you can see its fingers like extend, right? Like it can't reach all the way around this cockpit, but like the flowing of this kind of opalescence is like trying to like kind of envelop here. And I think maybe even inside the cockpit, there's like stress fractures on the glass.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think like at this moment, okay, here comes some of the hubris part. And I think like as this like hand is on it, we probably like flash to Rhodes, and in the cockpit, I don't think we would recognize him like in the not like in a physical way, but his motions, his mannerisms are like harsh and intense and like scary almost. And I think like as this is happening, where I think like losing control of the redshift, he's like trying to crush the cockpit that Hyacinth is in. He's flanked by reinforcements from the ring, but is unaware of it because he's so singularly focused on this conflict with Hyacinth. And I think we even see the redshift like triple, right? Like in like a mirror image. Maybe they're smaller, but you kind of see it like osmosis, like pull apart, right? And are they called funnels in Gundam? Like
yeah.
And I think it's like not like an exact duplicate, but they're like pulled out of it, and I think are similar to the redshift, like through like the core or torso or something. And those are facing the flank, and like the kind of innate like defensive ability here wipes them out. Like
okay, yeah.
Like it like they are gone in an instant. As I think like kind of just maybe from the hands or something, just like kind of arcs of this like fundamental energy, the same kind of crackling blue and black that the particle lance itself shows, just kind of tears a rend in reality. And when the light dies down, like those enforcements are in pieces.
Yeah.
And I think we start tumbling. Like, I don't know. I think this is maybe like still with a hand on the weight of ascension. Oh, you know what? Better than tumbling, fucking throws it. Like the redshift like hurls the weight of ascension towards the station.
Oh, yes. Maybe in this moment, also, we get like a cut into the station, and it's like, the station fractured at this point, damaged by the attacks on it. Similarly, though, coursing with like more energy than the station's ever had run through it, right? These machines are siphoning off even more power than like the station can safely produce anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I think like interior of the station, we can see, we cut from like the firing of like the first era armaments to the interior of the station, which is like shuddering with each blast as like the guns keep firing past their capability, right? Like, these like stone barrels starting to melt maybe from the force of just
cool.
repeated firing.
I like that. And I think, like hurling the weight of ascension, the redshift is like a close follow.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that kind of the center structure of the station is something like opening like an observatory, like there's this like crack here. And I think in that you can see the heart of this thing, like this ancient engine. I don't know what it is. I don't think Rhodes even knows what it is, nor do the station's inhabitants, but it's like activating. And I think hurling the weight of ascension, the redshift catches quickly, and I think like follows it like to, the station's like surface, and is just kind of like skidding it, right? Like, or like pushing it into the ground as it's like cutting this impact trail, it's very like Dragon Ball Z or something, and I think we kind of like come to a still in a crater, and it's in front of this superstructure of the kind of heart of this thing as it's turning. And I think the redshift is kind of standing over the weight of ascension, like shoulders kind of heaving as this thing is pulsing, like almost flickering, like, its boundaries are hard to define. As Rhodes and the machine speak in unison, right? Of when will you learn? How many times must you die before you understand? It does not belong to you. We do not belong to you.
Voice breaking up on the comms, right? 100 times, 1,000 times, again and again, forever. Look at the glory of it, Rhodes. Imagine what we could do. And, I imagine like the plating stripped from its arm, like wires exposed and sparking, the weight of ascension reaching up to try and grip the forearm of the redshift.
Mm-hmm.
It's the echo of the handshake we've seen again and again.
I think the redshift grasps it, tears it off.
Yeah.
Then you will die on 1,000 worlds. It will not end until you end. I hope you find your God so that he may smite you too. I think like this is not a killing stroke, right? Like, but I think is, plunges this particle lance like it does his best anyway to like plunge it into the weight of ascension. And as all this is happening, I think this like kind of the hotter the redshift burns, the core of this station is like looking more and more unstable. And I think like the more, the louder his voice is, the like brighter this thing is growing. I think even as they're like flaring up, like the station itself, like the lights that it glows with are sparking.
I think we get like, interior shot maybe of the cockpit again of the weight of ascension. And we can see, it's got this silver glass dome around it that is starting to crack. And I think that the cockpit itself is also starting to fill up with this kind of quicksilvery liquid. It's like rising up from beneath, like from the bottom of it, and it's come up already to Hyacinth's waist. And I think there's like almost like a panic that crosses his face, and I think it's like the remaining hand of the weight of ascension gripping the haft of the particle lance and pulling itself closer until like the glass dome is like face to face with the face of the redshift.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what it takes. And I think that's like when the core of the weight of ascension starts to go off, right? Like it is damaged beyond repair. The machine starts to destroy.
It's like a self-destruct sequence or something, or
I don't even think it's self-destruct. I think it's just a particle lance has pierced its fundamental reactor. It's going to be it can't stand up against. I think just like being in the aura of what the redshift is right now is like stripping away like the armor and the plating from the weight of ascension, right? It's like it's falling apart by just the sheer force of being near the redshift right now. And I think it's blowing up. It's being destroyed. And I think that as that's happening, one last shot in the cockpit of that silver liquid, which has now risen. So it's like, as he says, if that's what it takes, right? Like the silver liquid has come up to like around Hyacinth's neck.
Right.
It's like he's the last moment. And then I think probably, if you're okay with it, we cut to the exterior as the machine starts to just implode.
Yeah, yeah. I think like this is good, and I think that it may be imploding, and Rhodes like is seeing red, like has lost the mission. There is no awareness of this like battle here, and I think like as this is happening, like I think the kind of redshift like jumps right into the low gravity here, and I think we kind of like see this kind of liquid or a calcum form. I think the redshift like puts its hands together, and like it becomes this like energy rifle, right? Like it's, you know, it is kind of like melting into this gun, and I think we see it burn extremely hot as an even like greater eruption of energy. Like he just doesn't think about this at all. It's like the machine is almost making this decision, and fires like into the weight of ascension from a distance here through the station. I think also like in essence like hitting this core thing. Like it, this is the moment. Like Rhodes lost it, right? Like blew it. And I think that this is like we probably like I don't know if you have anything else you want to put down in here.
No, I think I'm good.
Because I think that this like kind of is where the lullaby part of Gundam Wing episodes like comes in, right? Is like it's bright white. We have like a flashback to Rhodes and Hyacinth as like young men like fishing or something. We see them in this training montage. We see them on a dozen worlds crossing swords, but I think we like kind of end here as Rhodes' like lucidity is coming back as the kind of like light begins to dim from this explosion, and there is very little left, right? Like I think that I think he's just effectively blacked out. The marble flagship is like ripped in half. You know, the station is probably coalescing into some kind of like red dwarf or something at this point.
Both fleets just skeletons, like right, like a graveyard.
Almost nothing here, right? And like what is left is jumping out of the system as fast as they can. And I think Rhodes weeps, like as we kind of pan out.
So, once every bit is accounted for, the winner gets one last bonus before ending the scene. It gets to cause harm or seize resources, and this can be anything. Do you know what you want to put as your final entry on your data sheet?
I am bidding to destroy the fundamental metamorph. This is something like Rhodes is frightened of, feels a great weight on, and has like, I don't know if it's a button or a switch or it's a part of the machine that's like obvious, but he like removes the control, right? Or it's like, this is, I'm refusing to do that again. Like that was not me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think like this is something that he locks away. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And I think like we probably go from this to him finding the closest beacon, and taking it as far as it can take him away from this.
That brings us to the ending. Look at your data file. Look at what was destroyed and what was not. There may be items there you chose to seize, or harm the other player has dealt to your pilot. With the full picture in your mind, it is time to make an ending. First, answer the final closing questions to tie up loose ends. Closing questions. Which faction won the war?
Concordat, I suppose, in that conflict. I mean, they keep winning. The ring is losing by the time we are in Beam Saber.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone won. Per se.
Right. Truly. Yeah, I think that's as good an answer as any for that one. What do your pilots think of the motives on their data files now?
Oh boy. My motive was constructed, that the Feldspari are purpose-built, born into the fundament, and innately connected to these war machines. It was something Rhodes resisted for such a long time because it was the kind of antithesis of what he believed. Mm-hmm. And I think reluctantly here has to acknowledge that maybe that is really all he is.
And my motive here is zealotry. I will be the key that unlocks the door to the builder. And I think in some ways more sure than ever, right? Finally, Hyacinth was able to in his mind, able to goad Rhodes into actually like utilizing the redshift in the maybe not in the way it was meant to be, but to use its actual potential. Spoiler alert for something our dear listeners have already heard, but he's not going to stop coming after it.
Yeah.
Did our pilots achieve their goals? That's easy.
I think so.
Not me.
I think so. At what cost? But
yeah.
Yes. I think unfortunately, yes.
What will the next war be fought over?
The same thing they're all fought over.
Well, I think it's a question we're answering in our ongoing campaign of Beam Saber here on Risky Standard.
Will either of our pilots be a part of it? Stay tuned and you'll find out.
All right, and then at last, conclusion. Describe a short image of your pilot sometime after scene 3. Use up to 2 or 3 resources from your data file as inspiration. Maybe they're lamenting something that was destroyed, or enjoying something that wasn't, or giving up something that has no purpose in their life anymore. Give an idea of what life is like now. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to?
I think you should.
Okay. Sometime after scene 3, years later, Hyacinth is inside, it's clearly a Concordat building. The walls are draped in tapestries and, gilded symbols of the 7-spoked wheel. I think we also see here, this place is full, whatever chamber he is in, right? There is this recurring motif of these mirrors that do not reflect, right? They show nothing in them. And I think we see Hyacinth is at, kind of like the very higher tech kind of Concordat version of like the holographic war table that we sometimes see in the low tower. He has solar maps laid out in front of him, and he has feeds of data scrolling down, like, multiple of them, right? He's in kind of like the information chamber. He looks not exactly the same, but closer to the Hyacinth that we saw in the Lost Crown Saloon, right? Like his armor more heavily cracked than it was even the last time we saw him, but it is now the gaps are filled with that flowing quicksilver liquid. And maybe we get a view of this table that he's looking at, right? And this is kind of our post-credit sequence, whatever. I think one of the things that is on this map is like a holographic projection of the cindered ruins of what used to be Feldspar. Another map, another is like the orbital depiction of the surface of Imber, specifically targeting the basin. And there, the text rolling there, scrolling beside it, are reports, rumors of space truckers having seen, ring ships in this area, right? It's reports of, ring troop movements starting up on this desolate little planet. It is all of like the spare little details that he needs to pull together to start to surmise that maybe this is where Rhodes Rampart fled to.
Nice. That's good. That's a good post-credit scene. I think, like, kind of in quick succession, we see... I honestly think, like, the redshift, like, hitching a ride on some kind of, like, interstellar, I don't know, like, freight ship or something, like, clinging to the outside of it. And I think this entire time, like, in transit, right, like, Rhodes isn't going to, like, the cryo sleep, somebody else might, is in the cockpit. And I think is, in a lot of reflection. I think a lot of guilt has essentially like turned off his like ring comms beacon and is not communicating with the world. He's seeking obscurity. And I think we cut to Imber some undetermined amount of time later, and there's probably like 2 kids or something at sunset playing in Coronatus, like on a rooftop. And we see one of them point at like a comet. Or like a shooting star coming down in like the purple and orange twilight. And, cut to, I think, like Rhodes shoveling some of the dry earth of Imber over like the last kind of piece of the redshift above the soil as he like returns it to the earth, right? Yeah. In some kind of distant part of Imber. I think maybe even puts up like a really simple, like kind of 2 pieces of wood nailed together like tombstone. And we see him walk away from it. This is like a part of Rhodes that he feels should stay gone now that Hyacinth is really dead. Wink, nod. And I think then, like, we kind of fast forward to where we are in Beam Saber, and where this like comes to a head is kind of concluding talking to Dez and Carta from the like hospital bed, and he's saying to them, right, like, and there you have it. If I couldn't be Feldspar's salvation, then I would become the Concordat's curse.
That's great. And that's the last shooting, everyone. As the game says, congratulations. In one session, you have discovered the lives of 2 pilots, illuminated by the glow of their opponent's mech. Thank you for playing. Big shout out again to Grant. Find the game on Grant's itch.io page, and been a real treat.
Thanks for listening.
Catch us here next time on Risky Standard.